My name is Nicholas Mercer. I'm currently a curate in the Church of England in Gillingham in Dorset. But before that, I was a lawyer in the British Army for 20 years. And I was the Command Legal Advisor for the Iraq War in 2003. My job was to try and ensure that at all times the British Army acted in accordance with the laws of war and any other relevant law that was applicable. In 2002, in November 2002, we were warned off that we would be taking part in the invasion of Iraq. And I went to the Permanent Joint Headquarters in January of 2003 and asked whether the Human Rights Act would apply on the battlefield. That wasn't met with much warmth or enthusiasm, and really the question remained unanswered. So when I actually deployed with the 1st Armoured Division into the desert and realised we were about to invade Iraq, I raised the same question again, whether the Human Rights Act would apply in Iraq. I gave them my legal view that I thought it would do in occupation, and was told in no uncertain terms that I was to give no legal advice with regard to the Human Rights Act. I left Iraq at the beginning of July 2003, and in September 2003, an Iraqi detainee by the name of Baha Musa was beaten to death during what was called tactical questioning at a headquarters in southern Iraq. The headquarters was the headquarters of the 1st Queen's Lancashire Regiment. And that eventually became the subject of a court-martial and a public inquiry. But the prisoners were very, very badly treated. They were hooded, put in stress positions, deprived of food and water and sleep, and also chained to generators whilst they were awaiting interrogation. And Baha Musa was basically beaten to death by one of the prison guards. A man was later convicted called Corporal Donald Payne of that offence. In my own case, the Human Rights Act protects prisoners of war. They're protected under international law, under the Geneva Conventions, and the Human Rights Acts have added and reinforced that protection. So I think it is wrong to say it just applies to criminals and terrorists. These are wholly innocent victims caught up in a war. They're a different category of prisoner. And now, because of the Human Rights Act, the proper protections are in place. And that is to be celebrated. It's a living, breathing instrument. And it develops over time. And things that weren't actionable years ago suddenly become actionable as society's values change. I joined the army as a newly qualified lawyer in 1991. I lived in that institution for 20 years. The Human Rights Act had an enormous impact on the British Army over that period. When I first joined the army, one of my first jobs was to go and visit prisoners in the guard room. Prisoners were locked up routinely on a day-to-day basis for all sorts of offences. And Article 5 stopped all that. I was a prosecutor in military trials, and they weren't independent and impartial. Indeed, I spoke to one military judge who said he was called in by one of the commanders at the beginning of the new year and told to stiffen up sentencing. And that was reformed by Article 6. When I joined, gay and lesbian soldiers were routinely harassed by the military police. That stopped under the right for the family life. And the sort of most unpalatable frontier for the army was seen as the battlefield. But actually, in all the cases I've just cited, it was a force for good in the British Army. And if you think about its application on the battlefield, and this is very new, it's 2011, the treatment towards and conduct towards prisoners has been improved immeasurably. So throughout those 20 years, the Human Rights Act has been a civilising force upon a well-respected institution in our society. And I wish it would be seen in that light rather than the negative way it's always portrayed.
Stories like this one could end so differently if we let the government scrap our Human Rights Act. Don't let them get away with it. Go to saveourhra.org.uk. Take action now.